Hi, everyone. I am Amy Zellmer, and I'm here with my assistant, Emily, today. And we're going to show you some of the basic beginner poses so that you guys can get a broader understanding of poses that I'm going to be using in my wellness and yoga practices. And we want you to be able to know the name of the pose and what it looks like and how to do it properly and safely. We want everybody to be very safe in their yoga practice. And I'm also going to show you some alternatives of using a chair in your practice if you have limited mobility, if you can't go from sitting to standing and onto the floor, or if too much cardio, if it's hard for you to get your heart rate up, the chair is a great option for those of you with any of those type of issues. So we're going to show you all of this today, but I just wanted to take a moment to just kind of give you a little bit of a background about yoga and how I want to help you integrate yoga into your daily wellness practice. Many of you have probably done yoga poses in physical therapy or in your rehab and don't even realize that you're doing yoga. Yoga is about 5,000 years old, but it has definitely evolved over the years. And just in the last probably maybe 100 years, it has transformed into sort of what we know as like a yoga flow practice. And our modern yoga has sort of evolved, at least in the West, in North America. It has evolved into more of a fitness yoga, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I also want to make sure that you know that they're very separate things. Like traditional yoga versus yoga fitness are very different. Yoga fitness is a very fast, quick pace. It's about getting your heart rate up. It's cardio. It's not necessarily about doing the poses correctly or having proper form. It's more about just going from one pose to the next quickly as you can to get your heart rate up, which, like I said, that's great if you want a high intensity cardio workout. But if you want a lower intensity and you just want to connect your body, breath, and mind, traditional yoga is more what you are looking for. And that is what I personally practice and teach. So we're going to start out by going through a couple dozen poses that you're probably going to often hear in my yoga practices. So we're going to go through them. I'm going to show you, I'm going to have Emily demonstrate, and I'm going to show you the proper posture. And I'm also going to hop on the chair and show you how to do some of these poses in the chair as well. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So if you want to follow along, you can start on a mat or on a chair, or you can simply just watch this and come back to it for reference later. But we're going to start in an easy cross-legged position, which Emily is already in. And if you struggle with tight hips, you're going to want to place a pillow under your sit bones. And this will help elevate your hips above your knees. This is much more comfortable for people with tight hips, or if you're in a bigger body like myself, or if you have an injury or mobility issue. So sitting on a pillow or a folded up firm blanket are really good ways to get your hips up just a little bit higher, and this feels a little more comfortable. So this is simply called easy cross-legged pose. It's exactly like the name is. It's just sitting crisscross applesauce. And so this is a typical starting or ending position in many yoga practices. And from here, we're going to go into bound angle pose. So this is where we're going to put the soles of our feet together and our knees out to the side. And again, if it's comfortable, you can stay on a pillow or a blanket. And the most important thing with this pose is keeping our back straight. And Emily's doing a great job with her back, but we really want to keep that spine nice and tall. We don't want to start rounding because that's when we can hurt our low back. So we want to keep our spine nice and tall. We want to sit on our sit bones. So our sit bones are those bones sort of by our tailbone that you literally sit on all day. And if you start to get a sore butt sitting too long, that's where your sit bones are. So we want to sit on our sit bones with our pelvis tilted up and our spine nice and tall and our shoulder blades pulled back and down. So I had a personal trainer once tell me that you should keep your shoulder blades in your back pocket. That's a really great analogy. So this is bound angle pose, and it can also be done lying on your back. Same thing, your soles would be together and your knees would be out to the side. But this is a really great hip opening stretch. And you can also incorporate a forward fold with this if you want to just forward fold just a little bit. And again, as we forward fold, we want to make sure we keep our back nice and straight, no rounding of our back. Do you want to demonstrate some rounded back? Yeah, we don't want to do that. We want to keep our back nice and straight as we forward fold. And forward folding doesn't have to mean you go all the way to the floor with your arms up in front of you. Most people can't do that. So it's forward folding just as far as you can. Okay, you can go ahead and come back up. So now have you go back into easy cross-legged. And in yoga, you're going to notice we do a lot of twists. Twists are really good for our bodies, especially for our digestive system. So a simple seated twist is you're going to take your left hand to your right knee, and again, up nice and tall, always working on keeping that back straight. If there's one thing you can do in yoga, it's just keeping that back straight with your shoulder blades back and down. Even if you're not able to do many of the poses, just focus on that posture alone. That's a great way to incorporate yoga into every day. So she's got her left hand on her right knee, and the right hand is going to come behind her on the floor as she twists to the right, keeping her spine nice and tall. And then if it's comfortable, you can take your gaze over your right shoulder. So this is a simple seated twist. I'm going to have you go ahead and go the other way to even yourself out. So right hand to the left knee, left hand coming behind, and just going into a nice twist. And now she's looking over her left shoulder. Okay, you can come back to center. And now I'm going to have her show you a supine twist. So all supine means is on your back. So go ahead and lay on your back. Why don't you put your head that way? And so a supine twist, this is a very classic pose that we will do. This is typically at the end of a yoga routine. I'm gonna move the block for you. You're gonna bring your arms straight out next to you. You're gonna bring your knees up to your chest. And on your exhale, let your legs come all the way to the right. And if they can come all the way to the floor, if they can't, you can always put a block under your knees if you're not able to get all the way to the floor. And then you can look over your left shoulder if that's comfortable for you. And then on an inhale, come up, and I'll let you go to the left to even out. We always want to do both sides. We don't want to leave a yoga practice feeling uneven. All right, go ahead and come back to center. And now I'm going to have you come up to tabletop position. So tabletop is, I'm going to try and get behind here. Tabletop is another pose that you're going to have a lot in a traditional yoga practice. So when you're in tabletop, we want to make sure that your hands are right below your shoulders and your knees are below your hips. So your knees need to come up just a little bit. There you go. And then when we first come into tabletop, your back is just neutral. And now we're going to come into cat-cow. So cat-cow is, if you imagine a cat stretches their back, and then a cow, we come up like this. So we're going to start with cow on the inhale. And then exhale, come into cow. So now see how she's got, cat. Now she has a cat back. And then inhale back to cow. So the back dips down just a little. And now the head, if you stop here for a moment, the head can stay neutral or move with the pose. So keep your head neutral on this next round of cat-cow. So, yep, come into cat and then cow. And see how her neck isn't moving? That is an option if you have any sort of neck problems or like vertigo issues with moving your head. You can keep your head very neutral, or go ahead and move your head with the flow again. Or you can move your head and neck with the flow. But this is a great warm-up exercise as we start a yoga practice. And you can go ahead and just sit there in tabletop. And I will show you in the chair, we can do cat-cow. We want to sit to the front of the chair on our sit bones, place our hands on our knees. Inhale, cow. Exhale, cat. So we hunch our back. Inhale, cow. Exhale, cat. So that's another really easy one to do in the chair. And I'm going to have you come up to standing in mountain pose. Now, mountain pose is the base of every single pose in yoga. So mountain pose is a pose that we kind of want to master. But it seems really simple, but there's actually a lot more to it than meets the eye. So first of all, you want to start, and here's a really good rule of thumb in mountain pose. Your feet should be about a block width apart. So your feet should be under your hips, which your hips are right about here. A lot of people think this is their hip, and that's just the side of your hip. Your hip bone is right here. So everything in yoga is about keeping our bones stacked on top of each other. And so if we get too wide, now we're slightly angling our bones. So keeping it hip width, you know, on someone of my body size, I might think hip width is out here, but it's not. Again, about a block width apart. That's about hip width. So we start with our feet hip width apart and our toes pointing forward. And we want to get our weight as balanced as we can in the feet. We don't want our weight all on the back or the front or the sides. So a good way to do this is we're going to look down at our toes and just lift our toes up off the floor. Spread our toes apart as best as we can. And then let our toes come down one at a time with our big toe coming down first. And then just feel the difference in how that feels. And then go ahead and let the weight move forward and backwards and to each side. And just feeling that weight distribution. And then finding the point where it feels like it's evenly distributed on all 4 points of your foot. That is where we want to be in mountain pose. We really want to engage our thighs, our quads, our core. We're engaging all of those muscles. Our shoulder blades come back and down, and our shoulders can slightly externally rotate. We can either bring our hands sort of like this, or we can keep them at our side. Whatever is most comfortable as you're standing in mountain pose. And this is a great pose to just stand in. And I like to get into this pose when I'm brushing my teeth in the morning. This is a really great grounding pose. And as I said, it's the basis for almost every single standing pose is built off of mountain pose. So this is a pose that you're going to want to sort of master, so to speak. Like I said, it looks really easy, but if you stand here with everything contracted, you start to feel it. Another thing you can do to really build your mountain pose is place a block between your thighs and squeeze it. Feels a lot different, right? It forces you to engage everything. And so this is a great practice to put the block in for a minute or two, and then removing the block and trying to recreate that feeling. So that's a really great tip if you're kind of new to yoga, to really start practicing on that mountain pose. Okay, now we want to go into a forward fold. Now I want to show several variations for a forward fold because not everybody can do inversions. So a true forward fold, I want to show us bring your arms up overhead, exhale, forward fold. So she can come all the way to hands on the floor. Not everybody can get here, and that's okay. Again, we want to make sure we keep that back straight which she's doing a great job. But this is an inversion. It means our head is below our heart. So go ahead and come up. Not everybody can do a forward fold. Not everybody can do an inversion. Some people get lightheaded. I've heard some people actually pass out. So please don't do a forward fold. But there's some options here. If you can do a forward fold, but you simply can't get to the floor, we can put a block down. And then you can forward fold to the block. That's one way. And again, she's not inverted. She's actually in flat back pose right now, which we'll get to in a minute, but she's not inverted. She's still got her head, she's parallel with her heart. So if this is comfortable, you can do this, stay here on a block. Go ahead and come back up. And another option is I'm going to show two ways to use the chair. So you can use the back of the chair, and you're quite upright. You're definitely not inverted in this pose. Or go ahead and come back up. And you can come to the seat of the chair. And you're a little bit higher than the block. It's a little bit more comfortable to rest your arms. So the chair is a really good option. Go ahead and come up. Now I'm going to show you how to do forward fold in the chair. Maybe one of my blocks. So if you're going to be seated in the chair and do a forward fold, again, coming to the front of the chair and your sit bones nice and tall, but we have to make room for our body. So we need to take our stance wider in the chair, and we can use a block. And so we'll bring our arms up overhead, exhale, come to a forward fold. And as you can see, I'm not inverting. I'm still even with my head and my heart. If you're capable and able, you can bring your hands all the way to the floor, but then you're getting a little bit of an inversion. So just whatever is most comfortable for you in that forward fold. Now, I want to go over one more thing about a forward fold, and that's how to properly do the forward fold. I've seen lots of people do a lot of different things. I've seen people bring their hands up like this and go like this. The correct way to do a forward fold with your arms. So we're going to bring our arms up overhead. And then I'm going to have you do this nice and slow for us. So you're going to bring your arms to the side. She's going to lead with her chest and shoulders as she swan dives with her arms, and then let them start to swoop down to the floor, the block, the chair. And then now likewise, going back up, we're going to do another slow, stay down. We'll do a slow motion up. So now on the inhale coming up, she's going to start bringing her arms out. She's going to lead with her chest and shoulders, and she's going to use her legs to bring her up. You don't ever want to use your back to bring you up out of a pose. When you're any pose that you're coming out of, you should be using your leg muscles to push you up and out of it. When we use our back, some people lead with their back, and that's when you can get low back problems. We don't want that. All right, so that's the traditional forward fold. And then we've already mentioned the flat back, but in a traditional salutation, we're going to do arms up overhead, and then we're going to forward fold. So go ahead and come to the forward fold. And then, so that's on an exhale, forward fold. Inhale, halfway up, flat back is the traditional saying that you're going to hear. And so you saw what she did. She's not able to keep her hands on the floor because we're coming halfway up. So now her back is at about a 90-degree angle, and she's bringing her head up. And then exhale, we forward fold again. And I'm just going to have you do a flat back one more time before we come up. So that's flat back. And if you were using a block and you're in forward fold, and then halfway up, flat back, exhale, forward fold, and then inhale, you come all the way back up again, arms overhead. And bring your arms to the side. So like I said, forward fold and half flat back are going to be very traditional yoga flow poses. And then I also want to show you ragdoll. Ragdoll isn't used in every one of my sequences for sure, but it's a lovely pose just to give yourself a nice stretch, especially if you've done a lot of poses with your arms out to the side. So ragdoll, just bring your hands to your hips. So we're going to forward fold. And then bring your arms down into ragdoll. So what she is doing is she is stacking her arms and just hanging there. And you can hold on to your arms or you can just stack them. Some people grab their wrists, whatever is most comfortable. And you just hang there in ragdoll. And then you can kind of rock from side to side a little bit. And your neck should be extremely neutral. You should be able to move your head around, yes, no, up and down. You should have no restriction in your neck when you're in this pose. Be nice and relaxed. Okay, go ahead and bring your hands back to your hips and come all the way up. So if we're not using our arms when we come back up, we can always bring our hands to our hips. And if in any pose, if holding your arms out to the side or doing this sort of motion, if that's bothersome to your shoulders, you can always bring your hands to your hips. This is always your yoga practice, and it's what feels good for you in that moment. And your yoga practice might look different every single day, right? Like there's days where you're falling all over the place, and then there's days where you just feel rock solid. So, you know, our body always tells us what we need to know. We just have to listen to it. So as you start doing yoga more regularly, you'll notice what your body is telling you. But so whatever is up for you that day, maybe one day you want to do yoga on the mat, and then the next day you just feel like using the chair. And all of that is totally fine. It's your practice. You make it what you want. Okay, now we're going to do kind of a fun pose called goddess pose. So this one, we're going to bring our feet a little bit further than hip width. Maybe a little more than that. And then our feet sort of turn out to the sides of the mat. And then our hands come out to the side. And then you come into like a basic squat. You don't have to come all the way down, but then you can come back up and then your arms can come all the way. And this is actually called star, where she's at right now. So star to goddess is a very common movement that we do. And one more time, and just hold goddess for me. So she kind of looks like a goddess in Egyptian hieroglyphics. So this is goddess and star pose. But again, the feet are angled slightly outwards. All right, and come back to neutral. Tree pose. So tree, again, is another super common. You're probably going to do tree pose in almost every yoga practice. So tree pose, we start by standing in mountain pose. Remember that? All right, so we start in mountain pose. And then we slowly, we're gonna start with the right foot. We're gonna bring our right knee up. And I'm gonna show you several variations. But a traditional tree pose, you're gonna turn the sole of your foot towards your inner thigh. You can use your hand to bring it up to your thigh. And then you can either leave your hands at the side, or you can bring them, what you're gonna do, you can bring them to heart center. Or to make it a little more challenging, you can bring them overhead and palms face each other. This is a little more challenging because you're getting a little bit bigger. You can look at spots on the floor in front of you or spots on the wall to focus on to try to help your balance. And I'm sure it doesn't help her having me talking and moving around next to her. But this is a traditional tree pose. And go ahead and bring your leg down. If you can't get your knee up to your thigh, I can't. You can bring it to your calf, or if you can't even hold it there, you can bring it to your ankle with your toes on the floor. That's a really good way to start especially if you have impaired balance. You can also do it standing next to a chair. So you can hold on to the chair for balance, or in a corner of a wall, holding onto the wall. And another option is to use a block. So go ahead and bring your foot to the block, like, yep, turn your knee out like you're coming in, yep. So you're kind of getting into the position, you're getting the hip in the right placement. I might have the block too far out for you. It probably needs to be more right there. Yeah. I'm realizing that. So this is a good way to start getting your leg up a little higher. Maybe you started on the calf and now you want to try and get it higher, but you still can't get it to your thigh. This is a great way to kind of get up to the next level. So that's tree pose. Oh, yep, please do. We always want to do both sides. So again, this is your traditional tree pose. And if you can hold it here, one thing we really want to watch when we're in tree pose is what our hip does. So try and bring your hip in a little. Okay, so before you go up, okay, so this is where her hip is standing. We don't want that hip to pop out. So I'm gonna come to the other side. So her hip's right here. So as she bring your knee up first, and then turn. It's harder. She didn't know I was gonna do that. But we really want to work on not popping our hip out when we go into tree pose, because that can, over repeated time, that can start to cause hip problems. And it's very common when you have tight hips for your body to want to do that.
Is it popped right now?
No, not too bad. It's a little bit, but you're pretty straight. Yep, you're there right now. Yep. Go ahead and come down. Okay, so our next pose, we're going to do chair pose. I'm going to have you turn to the side. And chair pose, again, we begin in mountain pose. So our feet hip width apart. And as we come into chair pose, so we imagine that you're about to sit into an imaginary chair. So you're going to start to bend your knees as you bring your arms up and coming back almost like she's about to sit into a chair. This is an incredibly great core building pose, and it also really works those glutes. And the hands, palms face together. And then to come out of this, using your legs, you push all the way up and bring your arms up, and you can bring them around or down. So chair pose, another quite common pose that you're going to hear a lot. And then I can also show you revolved chair pose. You come into chair. I know you know what it is. And we're going to bring our palms together and twist. Why don't you go to the right first? And so this is what's the revolved part. And if you can bring your elbow all the way to your knee. She's able to. Now go ahead and go the other way. They'll see a little better. Yeah. And she's able to get her elbow to her knee. But if you can't, that's okay. Just go wherever your body allows you to go. You can go ahead and come up. But that's chair and revolved chair. I'm trying to read my notes. Oh, no. So standing back bend. Okay, so face that way again. This is not Emily's strong suit. She has a tight upper back, but that's great for you guys to see, because I'm just going to be real here for a moment. When you see somebody like Emily, she has a very traditional yoga body. Hers is the body we think of when we think of yoga. And we also think of super flexible, bendy people. And not just because she's thin and tall doesn't mean she's super bendy. And she actually has a lot of stiffness in her upper back as well as her hips. So we've really worked through that. And when I first started working with Emily, she had no movement in her upper back. She could not do a standing back bend, and now she's progressed really well. But again, everybody's body is different. And I can't stress enough that every body can do yoga. I can do yoga. I'm in a bigger body. Even disabled bodies can do yoga. We just have to adapt maybe in a chair or a floor practice. So as we begin to go into standing back bend, again, we start in mountain pose, a nice strong mountain. And then we're going to slightly externally rotate our shoulders so our palms come forward. We're tucking the shoulder blades back and down. And then we're bending from the back into a back bend. Great job. And your head can stay very neutral. Your head can tip back if that's comfortable for you, but I tend to keep mine in neutral. Some people like to tip theirs back. But this is it's an intense pose. It looks pretty simple, but it's an intense pose. Go ahead and come up. And then that was a nice big back bend. So I'm going to have her counter that with a forward bend just to counteract that, because that was a big pose for her. And so whenever we do back bends, we do forward bends afterwards in a traditional yoga series. I can't read my writing. Oh, okay. Okay, now I'm going to go through some of the traditional flow series that you're going to go through. So we're going to start in a lunge pose. And so right here, Emily is in what is called a high lunge. And you can see she has a hand on either side of her foot. Her knee is above her ankle, and her back leg is straight out behind her. Now, this is a high lunge. A low lunge is where you bring your knee to the floor. And then if you are larger chested or have a larger body, you might want to bring both hands to the inside of your knee. And that just gives you a little room from where your thigh might meet your belly or your chest. In this pose, anytime we have our knees on the floor, you are welcome to use a blanket or a pillow underneath your knees if you have tender knees. So go ahead and we're going to come up into a crescent lunge. And so now she just took her lunge and she went upwards, and then hands facing each other. This is a crescent lunge. It's very similar to Warrior One. What you're going to see the difference, she's up on her toes right now. Now go ahead and come into a Warrior One. So it's a slight difference, but now her foot has turned outwards. Her back foot is out at like a 90-degree angle, and her front foot's facing forward. And turn your hips. The hips should be a little more square to the front knee. And we always want to watch our front knee doesn't just demonstrate. We don't want our front knee to do that. We want our front knee to stay over our ankle. Are you doing good? Okay, so now we're going to come in. This is called Warrior One. We're going to come into Warrior Two. So you're going to start by bringing your hands out to your sides and turning to the side of the mat. And so I'm going to walk her into the pose. So you're going to gaze over your front hand. In this case, it's the right. And you're going to, on an exhale, bend that front knee, coming into Warrior Two. Again, keeping that knee over the ankle, keeping this foot turned in, and the arms, to keep your shoulders safe, your arms should always be a little bit higher and a little bit back from your hip socket. That helps keep them safe. If this is ever not comfortable for you, you can put your hands on your hips. Yeah. So this is Warrior Two. And now we're going to go into Warrior Three. So she's going to come all the way up. We're going to start in mountain pose. Facing the front of the mat. She's going to attempt. All right, so it's going to start, and I'm going to bring you a block so we can demonstrate that too. I'm gonna guess it goes about there. So we're gonna start in mountain pose and then bring our right knee up. And then we're gonna start by slowly bringing that right leg back and our arms forward as we bend forward. Careful, there's a chair behind you. And I want you to keep your hips square. And so as you can see, we're keeping her back straight. Her arms are coming straight out in front of her. Her leg, this is as high as she can bring it up. That's totally okay. Some people can get it all the way up so they're completely straight. You can also use a block if you need to. You could use a chair. You could use a chair if you needed to. So this is warrior 3. So go ahead and come back up. This is one of the biggest balance poses, aside from headstand and handstand. This is one of the biggest balance poses. And it's a challenging pose, but it's part of the warrior series. So that is warrior 3. So we have warrior 1, warrior 2 is at the side, and then warrior 3 is a big balance pose. Okay, now we're gonna come into triangle pose. I'm keeping you on the right side. We'll do your left side later. So I'm going to place some block back here for her. But again, we're going to start out very much like the warrior 2 positioning. Our right leg, our right toes are facing forward, and our left toes are angled in. Right now, she's completely facing the side of the mat. And now she's going to bring her arms up to the side, very much like we're going into warrior 2, except this time we're going to keep this leg completely straight. And she's going to bend from the hip. And you can bring your arm to a block, to your shin, or to the floor. And then this arm goes completely up. And you can turn it. And your head can either look up to the hand, it can look forward, or it can look to the floor. Whatever feels most comfortable for your neck. And again, if this is too much for your arm, you can let your hand rest on your hip. And then go ahead, using your legs, come all the way up to standing. Bring your hands to your side. And now we're gonna come in. I'm gonna have you go into warrior 2 again. And then from here, we're gonna come into side angle pose. So right now she is in warrior 2. To go into side angle, she's going to bring her right elbow to her right thigh and then bringing her left arm overhead in a bend. So this is side angle pose. And this whole series of standing poses I'm showing you, these are all very common in any yoga flow class. So this will be a series that you will see a lot. Okay, go ahead and come up. And bring your feet together. I'll let you take a breath. She's getting a good workout. Now we're going to show you simple squat pose. Now, Emily can't do this pose very well, and that's okay. Again, it's great to show you that, you know, everybody has their limitations. So we'll start in mountain pose. And bring your feet just a little wider than mountain. And bring your hands to heart center and go ahead and squat down. And again, she can't really get here, but in theory, her rear should drop down. Does it work if I help you? No, okay, stay there then. So her knees are bending forward. We want them to be straight up. So go ahead and come up. I don't want to keep you there. Okay. So squat pose. I'm going to see if I can do it today. I haven't warmed up. So squat pose, our rear should come down and our legs should be at a 90 degree. I'm a little bit forward. And then you can use your elbows on your knees to help push your hips back a little bit. Woo! They popped on the way up. But squat pose is an incredible pose for improving our overall mobility. The Asian culture is very much a squatting culture, and they're very agile. And so we have a lot to learn from them. The whole Eastern culture where yoga came from, squat pose is a very incredibly healthy pose. And if you can think of your digestion and how being in that pose just helps gravity. So it's a very good pose for digestion. It helps build your leg strength, your core strength, but it really helps your spine. We sit at our computers all day long, and it's terrible for our bodies. We're hunched over, we're typing, and we need to, they say starting at 10 seconds a day in squat pose and build up to, what did I just do? Maybe 20 seconds. But you know, if you can build up to 5-10 minutes a day, my niece actually, even on a chair, she will sit in squat pose. Yeah. So she's been doing that her whole life. She just like intrinsically knew that that was a good pose. So she hangs out in that pose all day long. So power to you if you can get there. All right, now we're gonna come to the floor. Yep, we're gonna come to the floor. We're gonna start, I'm gonna move this chair out of the way a little bit. Oh, you know, I wanted to show them quickly how to do the warrior series in a chair. So you could put your chair on a mat, or you don't need a mat. But for the warrior series in a chair, so we can start in a lunge pose. So now I'm in a lunge, crescent lunge, warrior 1, warrior 2, keeping that knee out. Can't really do warrior 3 in a chair. I mean, you could kind of, you know, maybe get a little brave and reach. We can do side angle pose, and we can do triangle pose. So we can do all of those big standing poses in a chair. It just is a little different, but you're much more stable, you're much more balanced, you're not gonna fall. And if you want double protection, you can be up against a wall as well. If you do have some serious balance issues, you know, make sure you're being very safe. But the chair is a great way to do a flow practice. There might be, like I said, there might be like a warrior 3 that's not going to be as accessible in a chair, but just do something else instead. And then continue on with the next pose that you can do in the chair. So the chair is a great way. You're still going to get an amazing workout. I did a chair before I taught yoga. I did a chair yoga class, and I was like, oh, this will be so easy. And those cat cows, my abs hurt so hard the next day. I got a really good core workout. So don't let the chair fool you. You're still gonna get a really good workout. You're just gonna keep your heart rate a little bit lower than if you're on the mat, and you're not gonna get the inversions. So it's a great workout. Okay, I'm gonna have you come into downward facing dog. Now, actually, I'm gonna have you start on your stomach so I can show them. I'm gonna move this chair now. So if you're still pretty new to yoga, it can be hard to know where you need to be on your mat. And the biggest problem I see in down dog is people are either too far apart or too short. So a really good way to gauge where you are, where your hands and feet should be in down dog, is to start on your belly, tuck your toes under, bring your hands like she has, they're slightly under her shoulder, maybe even a little bit further back than her shoulder. And then you're going to tuck your shoulder blades down and under, or back and down, sorry. And then go ahead and push up into down dog. And she had to take a little step forward. She knows where her body needs to be, but that's usually a really good starting point. So down dog, when we are in down dog, she's doing a very good job. We don't want any arching in our back. Our back should be very straight. Our head should be very neutral. Can you move your head around? Yep. Our shoulder blades should be pulling back and down. Our sit bones should be reaching up to the sky. and our thigh bones should be pulling to the back of the wall. And not everyone, she's really good. Emily does have tight hamstrings, but she does really good. She can get her heels all the way to the floor. A lot of people, your heels are gonna probably be up. A lot of people, especially if you're new to yoga, you might not get your heels down and you might not get your legs straight. And so give us a soft bend. So it's okay to have a soft bend in your knees if you can't get your legs straight. So go ahead and straighten. But the biggest thing, I want you to kind of like move forward just a little. Yeah, this is what I see a lot in down dog. She said, I don't like it. But this is what I see a lot of people do. And this is where we need to pull those thigh bones back. The thigh bones go back, the hips go back, and the arms come down. So we're going to do child's pose in a little bit. And the upper body is very similar to child's pose. And the lower body is very similar to doing a forward fold, except now we're on a diagonal. So downward facing dog, probably one of the most known yoga poses, it's a big inversion. So if you can't do inversions, I want you to do child's pose instead. So now Emily, come into child's pose. So this is child's pose. Super comfortable pose for most people. This is a pose you can always, always, always come to in the practice. If you get too tired, if you get fatigued, if you kind of lost track of what we're doing, you can come to child's pose until maybe it slows down and you can regain what we're doing. But this is a great pose. It's a lovely resting pose. So come to tabletop and we'll show them how to get into child's pose. So starting in tabletop, again, the hands below the shoulders, the knees below the hips. We're just gonna push back towards our heels. We can bring our knees a little bit wider, and that allows our body to fit down in there. And you can bring your head, forehead to the floor. If your head doesn't quite reach the floor, you can use a block. But we want your head to rest so that your neck and every part of your body is very, very neutral here. If the arms out in front aren't comfortable, I'm gonna remove your block. If your arms aren't comfortable out front, you can bring them more on the floor to your sides. Yeah, like that. So you can always bring them to your sides. I personally prefer them in front. And that is also the kind of the same arm movement as when you're in downward facing dog. Now come back up to tabletop. I want to talk about the wrists. So a lot of people struggle with their wrists hurting from doing tabletop or downward facing dog. Now, as I said earlier, we live in a society where we're on our computer all day. And so we're doing this, or we're doing this on our phone, which is probably almost worse for our wrists. So we already have that going against us. So we don't know how to use our wrist strength when we come into tabletop or downward dog. When we're in tabletop, we want our hands, we want our fingers. Your pointer and your middle finger should be pointing forward. They should be completely parallel to the mat. And the more we can spread our fingers out, the more balance we give ourselves. And our weight should go to the front. Like you should actually be able to lift your wrists off the floor when you're in tabletop or down dog. I'm not saying I want you to lift them, but that you should be able to lift them. That is where your weight should go. Your weight should be going into this part of your hand, not the wrist. So now come back up into down dog. Again, same hand placements. Those first two fingers should be pointing forward. Fingers nice and spread out. And can you lift your wrist? see, like I could get my finger under her wrist.
At the same time.
Yeah, but your weight should be going to the front of your hand. And as you're new to yoga, it's going to be natural to put your weight here on the heels. And that is going to really hurt your wrist. I want you to work on putting the weight to the front. Go ahead and you can come back down the table. And a couple options, if it's hard for you, a couple options. You could roll up the mat a little bit and give yourself a little more cushion. Can you reach the blocks? And we can also use blocks to help us. So come into tabletop with blocks. Yep. So when we're using a block, get myself out of the way. Keeping the back of your wrist off the block, so that forces you to put your weight here. And then can you come into down dog with this? I'll move them up a little for you. Yeah. So getting your wrists off the back of the block so that you're forced to put the weight on the front. That's a good way to start training your body. I don't encourage you to do it this way for a long time. Go ahead and come down. But this is a great way to start training your wrists and training yourself on how to properly keep your wrists. Okay, so go back to down dog. And another common flow that you're going to see. So now you're going to inhale, move forward to plank pose. I'm going to get out of the camera's way. All right, so let's do that again since I was in your way. So she is in downward facing dog. She's going to inhale into plank pose. Now I want to take a moment to talk about plank. She's going to have to hold this. So plank pose, your rear should be down here. See how she's very in line? Bring your rear up a little. This is a lot easier to hold. Come back up. I want to show them the wrong way. But see how she's almost in tabletop? That's not where your rear should be. You need to be bringing your rear down here. It's a lot harder, but it's where it should be. Go ahead and come down. So if you can't do plank pose, but you are capable of doing down dog, so go back to down dog. If it's too hard for you to go into plank, you can come forward basically to tabletop by bringing your knees down. That's a good workaround if you have some upper body strength issues. So I'm going to show you the whole flow here from start to finish, a sun salutation, so you guys can kind of see what that looks like. So go ahead and stand at the front of your mat. So when an instructor says to stand at the front of your mat, it means you're standing up at the front of the skinny end. If the instructor says to stand to the side of your mat, they would want you to stand facing the long way of the mat. Okay, so I'm going to demonstrate a sun salutation. So inhale, bring your arms up overhead. Exhale, forward fold. Inhale, flat back. Exhale, step back to downward facing dog. Inhale to plank. Exhale, lower all the way to the floor. And you can bring your knees down first and come all the way to the floor. Now, if you're not able to step back to downward facing dog, get to downward facing dog any way that you can. If you have to take a couple steps, it's okay. You might have to put a knee down to get back there. It's okay. Do whatever it takes to get back there. Now that she's on the floor, we're going to show you cobra pose. I'm going to move these pillows. All right. So we start on the floor with our forehead on the floor. We bring our hands under our shoulders next to our rib cage. So they're down a little further than if we were going into downward facing dog. Our feet, our toes are flat on the floor. we're going to engage our quads and our thighs. We're going to engage, and you can actually put a block between to force yourself to squeeze, because if we have tight hips, our hips like to work against us and pull our legs apart, and it makes it a lot harder to do poses. So putting a block in there forces us to pull our hips in, and then we're going to pull our shoulder blades back and down. And as we come up into Cobra, we're not using our hands, we're using our back to bring us up into Cobra pose. Emily can get pretty high up into Cobra. Not everyone can go this high. You can take little baby Cobras, and you can either keep your neck real neutral or you can tip your chin up a little. And go ahead and lower back down. And now, Cobra and upward facing dog look very similar, but they're very different. So I'm gonna have Emily show you an upward facing dog. That's using the arms. Yeah. Yeah, so, and if you can, you even get the top of your hips off the floor. But this is upward facing dog. You're using more of your arms. You're using your back, but it's more your arms are bringing you up. And then go back down. Coming into Cobra, we're using purely back muscles to come up into Cobra. And so she could actually lift her hands off the mat. And come back down. And then now I want to do the sun salutation one more time. And we're going to change it up just a little bit. I'm going to give you a block. So go ahead, inhale, arms all the way up. Exhale, forward fold to the block. Inhale, halfway up. Exhale, forward fold. And now this time, we're gonna, instead of coming back to downward facing dog, if you're not able to do downward facing dog, go ahead and step back, and we're gonna come into child's pose. So if you're not able to do down dog, you can come back into child's pose, inhale up to plank, but you could go into tabletop instead. And then if you're able, you could push yourself up to plank. And then we typically would step forward to another pose. So like she just did, she stepped forward into a lunge. So modify it to fit you, and you can go ahead and relax. Modify it to fit you and your body and your level. It's your practice. You never have to do something that doesn't work for you. And again, those arms, if they're hurting, sometimes the neck can hurt with your arms because that's all connected through here. If that's hurting, hands to your hips. If something ever hurts, stop that pose. If you feel a sharp shooting, burning pain, stop what you're doing, because that is not good. If it's just a stretch, like oh, that hurts so good, go ahead and keep stretching it, but I don't want you to go to where it hurts. So that is most of our poses. We have one more pose I'm going to show you. It's our final relaxation pose, also called Shavasana. So you're going to come onto your back. This is at the end of a yoga practice. This is a very easy pose, as long as you can lie on your back. So Shavasana is our final relaxation pose. We usually stay here anywhere from 5 to 20 minutes, depending how long our yoga practice is. If it's a 60-minute practice, we're going to stay here for about 10 minutes. So we want to make sure we're comfortable. And so what we've done through yoga is we've gotten the heat going in our body. And as we did yoga, we wanted to keep the heat in our body. So now our body has heat in it. So we want to keep the heat in our body. Otherwise, we're going to get cold. So you'll want to have a blanket handy. And basically, we're lying on our back. Our feet are about mat width apart. Whatever's comfortable, you can let them flop out. Our arms are at our sides, palms up. Our shoulders are tucked back and under, and our head is resting on the floor. If you have low back problems, you can put a pillow underneath your knees, and that might be comfortable. You might also want a pillow or a block under your head. Some people like to have that extra support. But basically, this is the pose. Some yoga instructors are nice and will cover you up. And other times you're gonna have to cover yourself up first. But just making sure you got your toes covered. You wanna be kind of nice and snuggly under there because our body's gonna start to cool down during Shavasana. And Shavasana is a very important part of our yoga practice because we've just spent 50, 60 minutes working up our body, working up the heat, keeping the heat inside ourselves. And now we want to keep that heat as we begin to cool down. And while we're in Shavasana, you're going to typically have a little bit of a guided meditation as you focus on your breath. And then the instructor will typically stop talking for about 8 to 10 minutes as you lie there in final relaxation pose. Some people actually fall asleep, and that's totally okay. It means it's done its job. Yoga should be relaxing and at the same time rejuvenating. You should leave a yoga practice either ready for bed or ready to take on the day. So depending what time of day you're doing yoga, right? So I'm gonna have you go ahead and just come back up to seated cross-legged. Now I do want to show you guys a few more things on the floor. So go ahead and bring your feet out in front of you. She doesn't need it, but if you need it, you keep that pillow. So now I want to show you guys how to use a strap as well. Another very important yoga prop. We've got a yoga block, yoga mat, and now a yoga strap. So especially as you're newer to yoga, or if you're not very flexible, or if you're just not sure how flexible you are, we want to use a yoga strap. So go ahead and hook that around your feet. And yep, we're gonna cross the strap once. No, that's too much. And then the best way to hold on to the strap is by holding it and wrapping around your hand once on each side. That way you've got a nice grip on the strap. And so we're gonna do a seated forward fold here. And so she's up on her sit bone, she's nice and tall, she's got her back very straight, her shoulder blades pulled back and down. And we're gonna forward fold. And so she's going to walk her hands up the strap as she moves forward. Now, Emily, technically you can get her hands all the way to her feet, but for demonstration purposes, I wanna show this is a really safe way to do a forward fold. We don't want to arch, yeah, we don't want to round it back because that's going to hurt your low back. So using the strap, now go ahead and take it off your feet and now go into a wide forward fold, keeping the strap. Yep, so just one. So this is a wide forward fold. And so first of all, we're gonna square our shoulders to the left foot. We don't wanna be straight on our body. We wanna be over the leg we're bending over. And again, we're gonna do the same thing, forward folding by walking our hands up that strap. And then you can kind of use it to help pull yourself down. This is a great way to start doing forward folds if you're not very flexible. Some of you might be tight in the hamstrings, and that makes it harder to forward fold. And some of you might be tighter in the low back, making it harder to forward fold. Some of you might actually be hyper flexible, which is also a problem. So go ahead and go over your foot like on your own. No, okay. No, my back being straight. Okay. So Emily can get over her foot. And this is what she was doing when I met her. But if you can see, she's hung straight here. And so she's hyper flexible in her low back, but that's not a good thing. You want to keep that back very straight. And so that means she can only go about this far with her back straight. where before she was bending all the way over. But this is much safer. We don't want to hurt that low back. And the reason she was hunching is because her upper back is tight. So that's forward fold. Oh, and then let's do a bridge. Let's close it out with a bridge, even though I'm doing forwards and backwards. So bridge pose is another back bend that you will often do in a yoga class, and it can be done several ways. So we're going to start with our feet flat on the floor, knees up. I'm going to put a block between her thighs because we want to keep those hips in. We have a tendency to flop our legs out without even realizing it if we have tight hips. So her arms are at her side, palms down. She's going to tuck her shoulder blades back and under. And then using her glutes and her thighs, she's going to lift her back up, her hips up off the floor. And she can get pretty high. Not everyone can get quite this high. You can also use a block under your sacrum if this is a hard pose for you. So at least you're getting some of the back bend benefits. And go ahead and lower down. So bridge pose is another very common pose that you're going to hear in a lot of your yoga practice. But again, you can always use a block under your sacrum, put a block between your thighs. Because now I'm going to take this one out, now go into bridge. She's working really hard, but if she didn't try, her knees would come out. And that's because she has tight hips. So blocks, go ahead and come down. So blocks are your friend in yoga. I know some people are like, oh, I can do the pose. And that was Emily. She thought she could do the poses, but she quickly learned that triangle was much better with a block. So go ahead and sit. So anyway, I hope that this has been helpful for all of you. You know, if possible, I encourage you to have, number one, get a mat. Number two, get blocks and a strap. A strap is the easiest thing to improvise at home. A belt, a man's necktie, a jump rope. There are a lot of things. You could even use a hooded sweatshirt, you know, if you had or a pillowcase. You know, you can get creative with a strap. You can get creative with blocks, but I do encourage you to eventually get blocks if yoga is something that you want to continue doing. And then a quality mat, like Home Goods, TJ Maxx is a great place to get yoga mats. They're usually like 15 bucks. And I have gotten, this is, I believe, Gaiam brand. The blocks and the straps, I think, was $20. So on Amazon. So lots of options. But really, you know, starting with a mat is the most important part, and a real nice sticky mat. And I had her double mat it here today just to help demonstrate too. She was on a mat no matter which position she was in, but normally you only need one mat. All right, so thank you so much everyone for watching. I hope this has been helpful. Leave a comment below, let us know what you learned or what maybe we didn't cover that you are dying to know. We would love to hear from you. So thank you everyone. Namaste. Have a wonderful day.